everybody. Welcome to the podcast. We're really excited to have you here watching and listening in, and excited to jump in. Before we get too far into this, let me introduce the gang. I'm Scott. You got Tyler, Shamaegan, and Jeremy, and Tarley. So, hey buddy. Hi. How are you doing? Okay, so before we get too far into this, talk to me about what it is, this whole idea of podcasting. What is it? Why is it a big deal? Why is it a big deal to you guys?
I know for me, I like to listen to the radio, but I can't control what's on the radio. I can pick a station, but I can't really control what I'm listening to. But with a podcast, I really get to choose the content and kind of what I want to listen to. It's the internet radio, just like you have Spotify and Apple Music. You can choose what songs you want to listen to, what artists, and this podcast is the same exact thing, but with talk radio and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so if you're interested in this, you're probably already going to be watching. So we're going to just talk on certain topics about Christianity, and we're going to look at some people's stories, and we're going to break things down in depth and really get into it. Yeah.
Shamaegan, do you listen to any podcasts?
Yes, I love podcasts. What Tyler already said. Another thing for me is once I dive into a podcast that I really like, I stick with it because I've enjoyed getting to know these people, even though I haven't talked back to them. I really enjoy listening to their input, and I feel like it's a conversational style. So in my head, I'm kind of or I'm answering back questions that they have. So that's something that's really important to me is the conversation.
Okay, you guys tell me, what is each of your favorite podcasts that you listen to?
I'll go first. So my favorite podcast ever, and I will recommend it to everybody I ever meet and wants to listen to a podcast, is called Bowe Discipleship. And it's this guy who he approaches the Bible with more of an Eastern approach, with more of a Jewish approach. He really dives into the context of what the Bible is written in. More today, especially in our Western world, we tend to take the Bible almost at face value, too much, and that's not the way the Bible was written. And he literally walks through the entire Bible. He goes through Torah, verse by verse almost, and then he goes through the prophets, and he goes through the history, and he goes through the whole Old Testament, or as in the Jewish world, it's called the Tanakh. And then he also goes through the New Testament and talks about Jesus and how it all relates back to Genesis and everything. And then now he goes through church history, and he traces the history of the text. Is his whole thing. He's we are dedicated to the text and studying the text. It's really challenging. It's really makes me think about some things. There's some things I don't agree with, but that's going to be the case with everything. There's always going to be something you don't agree with on somebody, especially with somebody from a different worldview. So it just really challenges me to think critically about some things and to really challenge my understanding of the Bible.
Shamaegan, what's your favorite?
My favorite podcast is a true crime podcast. It's called Morbid, a true crime podcast. I really enjoy listening to them because I'm interested in things like that. And I really like hearing, one of the hosts is an autopsy tech. And so she can break things down to a logistic side of because this is her realm of work. And so I just think it's really interesting to be able to look at the psychology, look at how it affected people as a nation, as individuals. And I really like that they talk about people who are impacted by certain things, and if they were victims of whoever, they reiterate that this is a person. They just have so much emphasis on remembering the person, not the person who committed a crime. And so that's really passionate for me. And I just really liked the psychology and then the just logistics side of it.
It's called Morbid?
Morbid. A true crime podcast.
I'll add that to my list. Nice.
Jeremy, how about you, man? What's your fave?
My favorite podcast is the Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah.
He has a bunch of people that come on, and the topics range from economics to science or religion. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people that he has come on his podcast are pretty esteemed in their field. And so it's cool to see them break things down and really get into depth. There's a lot of variety, a lot of things to cover, and Joe Rogan's just an awesome personality. He's really cool to listen to. So that one's my favorite.
I've never listened to him before.
Jeremy, I'm so glad you brought up Rogan and that you brought up the guest thing, because I love that. And that's one of the things that I'm hopeful that we can do with our podcast also, is have guests come on and to do just what you were talking about. That if we are going to discuss different topics, I think it would be really great to have guests come and kind of weigh in on those things, especially if it's something that, they've had a lot of life experience with. You guys know this. One of the things that I've been talking a lot about lately at Discover Church is that the idea of us living a life of righteousness. That's what Jesus says people who are living in the kingdom of God are supposed to do. And I think there's, this connotation that goes along with that word righteousness in our culture today, that it kind of, maybe it's like piety, or it's been a goody two shoes, and that's not it at all. I think it's really more about finding balance in our lives with Christ, being able to kind of turn to him in all situations. And I've got a buddy who I've known for a long, long time. His name is Mark Nunn, and he does this better than just about anybody I know. And so I sat down with him and I talked to him about his life and his story and how he's kind of done that. And I would love to share that with everybody on the podcast and share that with you guys. So, is that cool? Let's watch.
This is Mark Nunn. Mark is the worship pastor at First Baptist Church in Grass Valley, California. I met Mark over 30 years ago when I got hired at my first job as a church youth pastor. He was the worship pastor there, and over the years, not only would he and I become best friends, but so would our families. Mark and I, along with a bunch of our friends, ended up starting a church back together in the 1990s. We saw God do so many miracles in that community during our times there. Mark has always had a passion for creatively using the arts to share with people the message that Jesus loves them. He's an incredible worship pastor, but he's so much more than that. He's someone who discovered the joy of life in the kingdom of God, even though his personal circumstances were never ideal. In his life, he has known more difficulty and hardship than most other people. He has lived with sicknesses throughout his adult life. He's dealt with grief at a very personal level. He's had plenty of opportunities to become frustrated and give up on God, but he never did. Mark is a husband and a dad. He is a friend to countless people. He is a talented artist, but most of all, he's a follower of Jesus, living his life walking daily in a relationship with him. This is his journey.
Hey everybody, I'm talking with a dear friend of mine, Mark Nunn, and I'm very excited about this. So Mark, how's it going, man?
It's good. How are you? Good morning.
Dude, this is like, there are gonna be some people that watch this that are gonna a lot of people that watch this.
There'll be people that'll get it.
What's going on? But there'll be some people that watch this that will be like, it's like the old Regis and Kathy Lee.
That's right.
Thing.
That's right.
Of course, there are a lot of people that don't have a clue who Regis and Kathy Lee even
right.
are.
Right. That's very sad. But
yes.
Anyway, we've been around a long time.
So here's the crazy thing. I've known you like 30 something years, man, which it's hard to believe that we're that old.
Okay. Yeah. We met March of 90.
With all of the things that we've experienced together and all the things that we've done, one of the things that I've always loved about you is that you are not, there's not a fake bone in your body. What you see is what you get. You're as authentic as they come. You're the real guy. And your relationship with Jesus is never, it is always the means and the end. It's not like you do the Jesus thing because it's your job. You what you do for a living as a worship pastor is obviously an extension of the calling that you have. But the calling that you have is about the relationship that you have. And I think from just what I know of you, a lot of that is rooted in, like your upbringing, and let's just start off. Tell me a little bit about what it was like to grow up with David and Carolyn Nunn being your mom and dad.
So my parents met. This is just funny, and this is going to be you and me and people that are in our age group, right? But I used to always laugh. What is the song by Human League? I was working as a waitress in a cocktail bar, right? Yeah. So my dad walked in. My mom was working in some place in Mobile, Alabama. My dad was a merchant marine, and he came in, and I think they saw each other, and right. And they both. And then lo and behold, and my parents were in their early 40s. And then lo and behold, my mom got pregnant. I think she thought I was the change. I was the change anyway. And so my mom got married. So I actually have a niece that is older than me, a nephew that's my age, because one of my brothers, had kids then. Right. So yeah, but I would say 90% of my life, probably 97% of my life, I do not remember anybody ever being in my house. Does that make sense? I grew up really an only child without really being an only child. Does that make sense?
But you were the golden child.
I was definitely an only child, right? And you know what? I think part of it was just different, right, for my parents, because said carefully without, right? My mom's first marriage was I think it started out well, maybe, and then it was anyway, and so. I just had a different life, right? And my dad had actually been married twice before, once where he had kids and then divorced, and then once again. And so I think it was just a completely different thing. So it was just different. And then what was very interesting about how just God's plan with my parents meeting everything, and then my mom's daughter followed, my mom's son followed, my mom's other son followed, my dad's son followed, and everybody came west, right? Yeah. And so they were here, like I was around them a lot, but they were also, married and, having kids. Like I said, I grew up with two of my nephews that I almost consider brothers because we were in the same age, and right. And my sister and her husband at that time lived down the street from us in San Mateo. And so, right, we went to the same elementary school for a while. And so, yeah.
The spiritual journey for you really started as a child, and your mom was really, I think, probably the first real spiritual leader, probably for you. Would you?
Oh, so I can remember like little bits of hitting on church when we got to South City. I think we went a little bit, right? And my mom had accepted Christ. I think she told me when she was 15, right? And then church, I think, just kind of fell out of the thing, right? And then, her working 24 hours a day, literally she was, she would, waitress during the day, bartend at night, right? At the end of, in that transition. And then me and my dad had come to California. And, but, I think as I look on it, I think there's such how do I say this? I believe God started speaking clearly to me, right? And I don't mean like audible voice, right? But I mean, God started drawing me, right? Even when I didn't know what that was. We became friends with a couple that were about 4 houses down. And so did my sister Ann and her husband Bill, because they lived on that same street too. And they started attending First Southern Baptist Church of San Mateo. And with that, then my sister and her husband followed. They started going there, right? And then eventually we started going, meaning my mom and I started going to that church. And really, I think that was just the beginning of the next phase of just my spiritual journey, right? So anyway, so long story short, we get to Western Hills. Then Western Hills is what First Southern became. So First Southern. And then, the thing happens on a Sunday night, right? as the Holy Spirit calls us to Christ, right? I just feel the pull, and recognize, Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior. So that happens probably when I'm in about 5th grade. I think it was 5th grade. One night we went to a youth rally, right? And there was a group from Cal Baptist called Free People. And as clear as I can remember, this morning making this cup of coffee, sitting in this little church somewhere in South City, I believe, San Francisco, I just sensed God speak to me right there in that moment and goes, I want you to go to Cal Baptist and I want you to do music for me. Not knowing really what that meant, but knowing what that meant in a weird way. And so that journey then, that was between 7th and 8th grade. And so then that led, I kind of, from that moment on, literally from that moment, I knew like, I'm going to Cal Baptist, right? This is the thing. I'm going to Cal Baptist and I want to lead music in the church.
Were you at Cal Baptist when you got class?
I was, yeah.
Okay, so let's, obviously that had to have been, life's going great, right? And then Colitis and your sister, can you talk about, because I think that, so many people make assumptions that, hey, if you're doing what you're doing, everything's obviously been great for you your whole life. And you've had all kinds of adversity.
Right.
Yeah. Probably has
so
more than the good stuff.
Right. Well, man, right. And man, isn't God good? So going back just a little bit. So then in high school, my sister started having some stomach issues, what ended up turning to something very, very, and it was new. I say I laugh, but there are ulcerative colitis commercials on television all the time now, right? It was not that way in like the mid 70s, right? So my sister got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. We didn't know what it was. So then I get to Cal Baptist and I started feeling really lousy in April of my sophomore year, right? So it's right before we go home for Easter. And I started feeling bad, but I just was like, I don't know what's wrong with me, right? And really not sure. And so then, flew home for Easter and then just got super sick at a restaurant, like just weird, like what is wrong with me, right? Did not know. And man, God's favor, I tell you, God's favor, how it worked, got to the doctor and then he goes, I think you need to see a gastroenterologist. And within like 2 days, which I feel like this never happens anymore, I was in front of a doctor and he was like, you have ulcerative colitis. And that was like, wait, what? Right. And in that moment, because my sister had, I never say the term right, a colostomy. My sister had a colostomy and he's already talking to me. Here I am, I'm home for Christmas. I'm home for spring break, right? And there's a chance you'll need a colostomy. And I was like, wait, what? God's goodness and all that, right, was he put me on some hardcore meds, right, that were terrible to take, but it literally turned it around. And so, but there I am. So now I'm on meds 4 times a day for colitis, missed about 4 weeks of school, lost like 25 pounds. It was crazy. And then went back to Cal Baptist to finish out the end of my sophomore year. Yeah.
You're a college guy at that point in your life and and things are going great. We don't think about them going great with that.
Right. Yeah,
they're going great. And then all of a sudden this epic, prognosis gets put on you. Did you ever think, hey, wait a minute, God, I'm at a Christian school and I'm wanting to maybe do something for you and this is how it plays out? Did you ever?
I don't think so. I think I was so caught up in the illness and I don't think, said carefully, I don't think I can remember about 4 years later after I'd finished Cal Baptist feeling kind of bitter.
Yeah.
Right. Just feeling like crap all the time. Right. I just felt terrible all the time. Right. And pushing through and because, I started feeling better and then can I just go on? Is that fine? Yeah. I started feeling better. Right. And, I love you. Anyway, I'm just like, is this good? Sorry. Anyway, so going on, and then my senior year of Cal Baptist, so I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in April of 80. And then January of 82, which would have been the beginning of, it was actually the J term of my senior year. And I was there taking 2 classes, just cramming in everything before graduation in June. And then my sister passed away. Like, wait, what? And it was crazy. My mom called me that morning. She was like, Anne's at the hospital. Okay, they're not sure what's wrong. And I'm like, okay, well, you know what? It was just weird. When she talked to me, I said, you know what, Mom, I'm going to get on a plane. And just back in the old days, I called, and, there was an AirCal flight in like an hour, threw some stuff in a suitcase, drove out to Ontario Airport to fly home. And so anyway, land at the airport, getting off the jetway, and your friend and mine, Uncle Don Fugate, was waiting and when I was coming up the jetway, this is another scene in my life that I remember well, and he was a mess. And I was like, what's going on? Right. First place, why is Don here? And second place, and my sister in that time that I flew had passed away. And so then you add that to it. I was like, wait, what? And just from complications of the colitis and everything. And so that is definitely a moment of just shock, right? My sister's 39 years old and now, right? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah. I think really made me want to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
The very first time I did this podcast thing, right? Thinking about that God calls us to live this life that he describes as a life of righteousness, which is not goody two shoes. It just means, I think, this consistency thing where we keep coming back to him and we keep letting him, reveal himself to us and sustain us, right? So you had a moment right there where you could have easily checked out and just said, I'm done with the God thing. And instead, you kind of like were, okay, well, I guess, God, you're going to have to be, my anchor. And seemingly things start to kind of turn back around. You meet Kathy Trice, and she becomes that lovely bride I see in the picture behind you there.
Yeah, you know what? That picture, I just got that when Kathy's, we were getting stuff. Kathy's dad passed away a couple years ago, and I did not have that picture of her. And so, like, when we were getting stuff, right, I was like, whoa, I'll take this, right? Like, yeah.
Life starts going good. You had all these wonderful things happen. You met Kathy. Then you met a young youth pastor guy who,
one of my best friends. Yes.
What? Life, right? And just skip forward. Everything's going great, and you and I decide to start a church,
right?
And that's crazy. And
absolutely did not see that coming.
Other things happened in there. You started, down the road of being a dad during that time too, and stuff. So everything's going great, and then you find out you have the C word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cancer. Yeah.
Come on, colitis and cancer.
Right. Yeah. So the doctor comes to me after I have another colonoscopy and says, we don't see any evidence of it. And I was like, yeah, because God's healed me. And he's like, well, you're in remission, remission. They like that word. And to me, I'm like, I'm healed. And anyway, and so done with meds, like my colitis was gone. I mean, unbelievable, right? So crazy, because I had really struggled, especially like at 24, like I was just struggling, like, God, man, I'm just tired of this. And, people wanting to pray for me. And I was like, just really, and then, 92, God's faithfulness, right, is that I'm healed. And so 92, and then, Kathy and I, have Amber and Austin, and, things are moving. And then one morning I was going, because I was experiencing dry hands, so I was going to the dermatologist, right, to like let him look at the skin thing. And Kathy was like, oh, you should let him look at that mole on your back, it looks funny. And I was like, no big deal. And sure, I'll do that. And what if you don't know me is that I was a sun worshiper. Like, I love laying out in the sun. I would do it today if I could, but I can't. And I liked the tanning bed in the winter, so like I just liked being tan. I don't know. I loved it. The doctor says, it's nothing, takes it off. And then like calls me the next morning. Hey, could you bring your wife and come back? And I'm like, why? And he was like, I just need to talk to you, but I would like your wife with you. And I was like, why? And he goes, I just need you to come in. And then we go, and, and anybody who has, been told they have cancer, they know that feeling. You're sitting there. And for me, it was almost a weird out of body experience where all of a sudden they were talking about somebody else. Like I was watching a movie about me, and so they tell me I have melanoma.
And then it really got interesting.
Yeah.
Tell the story. What happened when they, Tell them what happened next when you got into this.
So then they started running the test. And they go, we think we already see evidence of cancer on your brain and on your liver. And I was like, okay. And so then they decide to do the surgery. And there's, we get to the surgery, and Scott will remember he was there that day. Anyway, and so go to do the surgery. And then somewhere in the surgery, I went into anaphylactic shock. The only part that's weird is I remember when they were shoving the tube down my throat for a second, however you remember that is weird. But anyway, and I went into anaphylactic shock, which they stopped the surgery and threw me into ICU.
Luckily, they were great doctors. I'll still never forget sitting in the waiting room and watching them run by the window, thinking, "Is that okay? Is that normal? Does that happen here all the time?" Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. Kathy had no idea that it was me.
Oh man, it was nuts.
Yeah,
it was nuts.
And so I woke up in ICU, kind of like, and everybody was staring at me. And then they were like, "Hey, we need to postpone this for a month and let you kind of get healthy again." And okay. And so they did, and God's favor got back. The next surgery went fine. They got the cancer, and then they sent me for more CT scans and X-ray. And they're like, "You know what? We don't see anything on your brain." And I said, "That has been said by many a teacher. We don't see a brain." Anyway, and then they were like, "You know what?" They did the sonogram. They're like, "There's nothing on your liver." And I believe God had they were able to get the cancer. It was not spread. They took a few lymph nodes, everything, and just the goodness of God again, that, we came out of that, and God was like, "No, this is not your time."
Okay, let's talk about Kathy a little bit. I mean, when you first met
the beautiful Mrs. Nunn.
Yeah. Well, when you first met her, I mean, I think you probably thought she was a swell gal, but
Right. She is 7 years younger than me.
Yeah. And talk just a little bit, not just about falling in love, but what it's been like to be in love all these years. And, somebody who maybe you thought was neat when you first met her, but you didn't think that's going to be my wife, to eventually become your soulmate who you couldn't imagine doing life without, 40 years later.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, I just, the goodness of God. I mean, I recognize the older I get that so many things that have happened in my life, I go all the way back to my dad walking into that bar my mom was working at. God has just been so faithful and on my journey, right? And just anyway, so long story short is after I traveled with a group called the Continental Singers for one tour. And in that tour, my good friend Don Fugate, we were talking about, left the church where he was worship pastor at Western Hills to go. And so I became the new worship pastor at Western Hills, which was awesome because it was a church I'd grown up in. It ended up being an amazing time. That's how you and I met. That's how you met your wife, Cindy. So anyway, just so awesome. Like I could have never planned my life. I never could have planned my life the way it just has played out so beautifully. It's God's goodness in that. And anyway, so I get there and there's this new girl, and she was a junior in high school and I'm 23. Right. And she was just awesome. Right. Just a great, great, great girl. And so she was always like willing, like if I was building something at the church, a set for a musical, she would help, and so just really great. Well, what I've learned, that she would point out is that my mom was praying for this. I think my mom recognized it and was like, "There's the one. I'm going to pray this and it's going to happen." Right. I had no idea. Right. I had, just did not see this coming. Yeah. So anyway, so then Kathy graduates from high school and goes to college in Oklahoma. And, that was it. And my mom told her, "I think Mark likes you." And I did not know that until I don't know, years ago, but, I did not know that for a long time. And so Kathy went away to college and I was like, and we would talk back and forth on the phone. Right. And I was like, this is it. So we started officially dating at Christmas of her freshman year. And so anyway, and then Christmas of her sophomore year, I said, you want to get married? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, you want to finish school? And she said, I can change schools. And so we got engaged in December. We got married in August. And then, how things have moved. And then we had Amber and Austin and Aaron and Aiden and Ashton. And, we've been at 3 churches and just moved forward. And, I think just her role and being, I would say sometimes the spiritual leader to me, right? In times when my life is like this, right? Just her faithfulness and praying for me, praying for our family, right? And man, it's been amazing. And she's,
The journey that you guys have been on, it started off, I mean, I fell in love with your daughter the minute you had your daughter. I mean, Cindy and I wanted to have get a dog, and then it was like Amber came.
And Amber came, yeah.
And I said I want to have a baby, because I was so in love with Amber, right? You guys would have been great with just the 3 of you, but you became this family man,
right?
That
which I did not see because I didn't like kids.
Well, that's where I want. That's where I want this to go. And that part of the journey didn't just start with Amber; it's led all the way to China.
Yeah, right.
So talk about what that's been like, and even the spiritual aspect of the role of being a dad.
I did not want to be a dad. I don't know. I was not a fan of children. It's just funny when I say it now, right? Even though I was a pastor and I loved doing children's choir and stuff, I was like the guy on the airplane that'd be like looking at, children making noise on the plane. Oh, anyway. So then, I told Kathy when we got married, 5 years before we have a kid. Right. And, so then we had Amber and then we had Austin and then perfect, done. Right. And then I had cancer. And then I really felt God saying, is your life plan your plan or is it my plan? And I think that was really kind of the beginning of, okay. And so then we got pregnant again, which I haven't talked about, and told everybody. And then Kathy miscarried. And that really shook us, right? Like, that had never happened. And for everybody that's experienced that, they know just the pain of that. And so, and then we had Aaron David, and I was like, good, this is going to be fun. And then she was like, I'm sure she was praying without saying. And then I was like, you know what? Amber and Austin are kind of a thing. And then we have Aaron. And so then we had Aiden because, and they truthfully, how things worked out, there was those 2 and those 2. And then we had Ashton, right? Ashton was kind of like, well, if it happens, it happens. And Ashton, and, I had Ashton, I was 47 when Ashton was born. Then meeting a young couple came to our church that had some biological children and then adopted a little boy from Congo. I can't remember. And so I said to Kathy, what about these? She did the research right away. And so then we did all the process of paperwork and background checks and all those things. Background checks, all those things. And then they were like, we would love for you to adopt a child from China. So I remember one morning praying and I said, God, if you would make it really obvious to me, the child, like, you could give the child an A name, that would make it super easy. And because we got Amber, Austin, Aaron, Aiden, Ashton. So an A name, I would know this is what we're supposed to do. So anyway, I don't know, it felt like maybe even within that week, Kathy and I were in the car driving to San Francisco. We had something in the Bay we needed to go to. And the lady from Holt, I believe, is who called us through our social worker. And she said, hey, there's no commitment to this, but there's a boy that has come up in our files. And we just thought, what, maybe this would be a match for the nuns. And they're like, okay, so I'm going to send you a file. But like I said, there's no commitment to this. The orphanage calls him Adam. And I'm like, And I looked at Kathy and we were like, this is him, right? We don't know. And I wouldn't let her, you would have hated this too, because I know how you are. I wouldn't let her open the email until I could see it at the same time, because we were on the freeway, and I know she was dying, right? Because they said, we've sent a picture, email a picture. So anyway, so then she calls the kids, like calls Austin. Austin was in college, and he's like, that's him, and they were like, well, wait a minute. Do you want to know something about him? And we're like, no, it's him. And so from there, we looked at the files. This was him. And we began the process and the fundraising and everything we needed to do to get all of our ducks in order to fly to China. And so summer of 2015, Adam came home and we brought him home.
Okay, so you've lived on this planet 6 decades. We'll just say that. You've been on this planet 6 decades.
Yes.
And you've had like so much life. I mean, you've really lived a lot. And this one thing that just keeps running through all of it is not that you're some kind of super Christian and that you've been some kind of,
I do not believe I am at all.
No, but you're the most real Christian I know that's had, this life that's been up and that's been down, but you've always walked it with Jesus, and you spend your days not just being a dad, not just being a husband, not just being a friend. You spend your days not just being a pastor. You spend your days being this guy in this relationship with Jesus, and that's marked everything for you. No pun intended. Marked things for you. When you get the chance, whether it's directly or indirectly, to just sort of, live your life in front of people, what's the thing that you'd say has been the most compelling for you as a follower of Jesus? How do you know this is going to be another day that I can spend with him? I can trust him. He's going to be there.
His faithfulness to me, because I'm a mess. You know what I mean? Man, God has been good, because I don't believe I deserve the blessings that he has given me. I look at my life and I go, man, I don't, I messed it up yesterday, right? I'm rude. I'm kind of a jerk sometimes, a lot of times, right? You know what I mean? All that stuff. And man, God is faithful. And there's a verse about, what is it in 1 Timothy about, thank you, Lord, for allowing me to be a part of, basically, this is very much my paraphrase, right? Being a part of your work, right? Because, I've had doubts. I've had a lot of fears. I worry too much, even though my very favorite verse says, don't worry about anything, pray about everything, right? And then the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. I often don't guard my heart and my mind like I should, but man, God has been faithful. And when I stop and go, wait a minute, and allow Jesus just to kind of come and take control again, that's when I just go, man, he has been faithful through all of it. And it just, that, like I said, like that human nature song. I mean, human nature. There's my Human League song, right? My parents, right? That God's plan was for them to meet, and they were planning to have kids, and me, and right? And then God has been faithful to just take me through this journey. And I think the thing really that 60 that has really hit me is not only his faithfulness to me, but the people he has put in my life through every season. And just so thankful for the people that God has allowed me to, just put them in, however that, someday I feel like I heard somebody recently say when we get to heaven and someday we're going to go, oh, right, about whatever, right? Oh, right. And I'm waiting for that. Oh, I get it now, right? Yeah. The hard times, the good times, the great times, the sad times, right? Oh, but anyway, just, that he's allowed me to just be blessed beyond I could have ever imagined in the midst of what a mess I make of my daily life.
That's good. Thank you, my brother.
I love you, man.
Hang on, I'm going to do this.
Terrible heart.
So that's my friend Mark. What do you guys think?
Seems like a cool guy. I feel like I want to be friends with Mark.
Yeah, I want to be a friend too.
I think the cool thing about his story is that he's had so many experiences, and so many of them are both blessings and difficulties or hardships. you know? And it's that idea of balance again. He's really learned to draw that balance between the good and the difficult.
I know, like one thing that resonated with me that he talked about was when he said, God just asked me, is this your plan or is this my plan? And so when we were, and he also talked about just letting everything be in God's timing. So when we were thinking about moving from where I grew up and lived my entire life to come to Tulsa, a place that before we moved here, I'd only been to Tulsa like one time. I've driven through Tulsa a couple times, but I've only like been one time before that. And it was a year before we came. But anyway, so we moved up here, and it was just this process of learning about God's faithfulness, and that no matter what, even though we're going into something unknown, that God is faithful, and His timing is perfect. And so even if things seem like they're not going to work out, or they don't seem, doesn't feel like it's what we want, God's timing is always better, and God's plan is always better than our own plans. So that's something that I kind of resonated with.
I think an important way to look at it is a lot of times He'll allow you to be in these situations. A lot of times people, they won't come to God or kind of realize what they're doing until they hit that rock bottom. And so a lot of times I think He puts us in those situations for us to kind of turn things around and come to Him. And I can see that happen in his life quite a bit. And so you just have to put it in God's hands, like you said. And He always has the right way out.
Jeremy, I love that, man. I love what you just said there about, us turning to Him when we're at rock bottom. And I think that's like, then the next step is for us to really start going to God, even when things aren't bad. You know what I mean? Going to Him when things are good. And I think that's how we grow and we learn. And I think that's really where the righteous life really kicks in, Trusting
God, it almost seems like it's a learned skill. I mean, to say a skill, I feel like diminishes it, but I feel like it's something that we learn and we grow in, just like with everything else with our walk. But I think like trusting in God is something that we have to experience some stuff to be able to learn how to lean on Him. And I feel like our church has gone through a lot of that over the last couple of years. And out of that came, the center, which has been such a great, the whole time he was talking, I was thinking about that song, and thinking about the story behind it. And, I just think learning to trust God is really important. And that's where, the life of righteousness kind of comes in, is that we have to trust God to be able to live that life. Because we can't do that on our own.
Yeah, and then I think he also talked about, and I think it was really good, that he recognizes God has put people in his life, because that's it. I mean, we have to do it with God, and we have to do it with other people that God has put into our lives. And that's the whole idea of community. I mean, that's what Discover Church is all about, and that's what we want the people who listen to this podcast to really key on, is that we need to have people in our life. And it's one of the things that I'm hoping that this podcast does, is it kind of helps us to become more connected with other people. And for example, Shamaegan, I would imagine there are people who are listening and or watching to this podcast and are saying, okay, I know Scott and I know Tyler and I probably even know Jeremy, but who's that gal?
Who is that girl? Yeah. I'm sure that that is probably a question.
Shamaegan, you are a photographer. I mean, you have a neat husband named Lawson. There's all kinds of stuff about you. I mean, you kind of joined up with our community over the course of kind of the COVID quarantine time. And I think it'd be really great to get to know you a little bit. Let's kind of hear your story.
So every time I meet up with a client, I ask them what scenery they're kind of wanting. And so I want to make sure it's tailored to exactly what they want, but I'm like, the raw image is going to obviously look different than whenever you edit them, because editing is art. So yes, I want to see what they are envisioning, and then I have to take it from like the logistics side and then also like the art side and be like, what can I do with this place? Actually, this is a funny thing. So my sister was a senior 2 years ago, and we wanted to photograph or have photographs done for her, but some photographers charge a lot, and it just wasn't like in the means for my family. So my mom was like, if I buy you a camera, can you take your sister's senior pictures? And I had never done people, and so I was like, sure. I mean, like, what's it gonna hurt? I'll at least try. And I was like, wow, like I did that, and I was so like proud of myself. I did all my sister's senior pictures, and then someone else was like, hey, I saw your pictures, will you do mine? You know, and so I got like more of like the small community of my sister's friends, and then it kind of just branched out a little bit. I think just a combination of things. There was never like one picture that I was like, wow. It was like people saying, I love your work. And I was like, wait, what? My favorite thing about photography is meeting people. I'm a people person. I love to have like in-depth conversations. I want to take like, what do you do for a living? What are your hobbies? It's not just like, let me just take your picture and I'm done. And I want to build a relationship, because when you build a relationship, they have a connection with you, and then you care about them. You care about their family and their kid's birthday. So I just feel like photography has opened another way of me seeing the world and seeing God's light that He puts into the world. And I know, I never had thought about it because I was like, it's just pictures. But until I was able to wake up and see a sunset and just enjoy that moment, or see a little kid laughing because he had a birthday and rejoicing and just having so much happiness that he was able to make it to the next year because of God's grace, was, and it still is, it's an amazing feeling. And to just know like I'm a part of that, and I'm seeing that, what we might consider small, is actually a really wonderful thing.
Shamaegan, that was so awesome. I love it. I love it. Now, you are on social media, right? I mean, how would people find you if they would like to have you take their photo?
It's Shamaegan Ray Photography. I should be the only one out there.
Awesome. How do you spell Shamaegan?
Shamaegan.
Awesome. Hey, so, and then there's one other last thing that we really want to do with this podcast. We would like to also integrate worship in it. So Tyler, you've picked out something special for us to end this first episode with. Tell us a little bit about what we're going to hear.
So this song, it's my favorite worship song right now. I talked about the center a little bit ago, but this song's called Gratitude. We've been doing it the last couple of weeks at Discover, Sunday mornings and Thursday nights, and it's by Brandon Lake, and it's, like I said, it's been my favorite worship song, and it just expresses this this sense of gratitude and thankfulness, and it really forces you to think about, like, man, what am I thankful for? How do I, on a daily basis, express my thankfulness to God?
got nothing new. How could I express all my gratitude? I could sing these songs as I often do, but every song must end, and you never do. So I'll throw up my hands and praise you again and again, 'cause all that I have is a hallelujah, hallelujah. And I know it's not much, but I've nothing else fit for a king except for a heart singing hallelujah, hallelujah. I've got one response, I've got just one move, with my arms stretched wide, I will worship you. So I throw up my hands and praise you again and again, 'cause all that I have is a hallelujah, hallelujah. And I know it's not much, but I'm nothing else fit for a king except for a heart singing hallelujah, hallelujah. Come on, my soul, don't you get shy on me, lift up your song, 'cause you've got a lion inside of those lungs. So get up and praise the Lord. Come on, my soul, don't you get shy on me, lift up your song, 'cause you've got a lion inside of those lungs. Get up and praise the Lord. Come on, my soul, don't you get shy on me, lift up your song, 'cause you've got a lion inside of those lungs. So get up and praise the Lord. So I'll throw up my hands and praise you again and again, 'cause all that I have is a hallelujah, hallelujah. And I know it's not much, but I've nothing else fit for a king except for a heart singing